Hello, writers, and welcome back to Spooky Writes, your channel all about writing. I'm your host, who is secretly a ghost, Kamal Onor. Now, today we're going to be talking about editing, specifically how to edit and make sure that you are, in fact, showing rather than telling. So make sure if you get any value from this video, give it a good thumbs up. Make sure to smash that like button. And while you're down there, feel free to subscribe. Help the channel grow. It means a lot. And with that said, let's head into the storm.
It's the raven's call, the werewolf's howl, the vampire's bite. You search through the woods for safety, but all you find is... Okay,
And I've heard so many beginning writers have heard the advice, show, don't tell. But how do we know if we're telling rather than showing, especially when we go back and we look at our own work and we're in the revising and the editing stage? There's going to be two words that you need to be on the lookout for. The first is going to be the to be verb. So if you're writing a lot of sentences that are he is or he felt blank, right? So if you're writing a lot of sentences that are he is sad or he is happy, he felt, and felt is going to be the other big word that's going to tip off and should send little warning bells, little bells that say you're showing rather than telling. And again, there are no writing rules that apply to every situation. Yes, there are times when it's perfectly fine to tell rather than show, but you need to make sure that there is a balance to your writing. You don't want it to all be you just telling the reader. You need to respect your reader, and you need to trust that your reader is going to be able to read between the lines. Your reader is going to be able to interpret your writing. And if you don't trust your reader, you're going to be treating them like a child, and readers don't want to be talked down to. I know I hate books when the author treats me like I'm a child, and I see this all the time in young adult fiction, which I don't read a lot of YA anymore, but in the past I remember reading YA, and there are authors whom I greatly enjoy who write for YA. They identify that they're writing for young adults, but instead of treating them like children, instead of treating them like they're down here, they instead treat their audience as adults and raise them up and expect them to either look up, or they trust their readership to be able to interpret and perhaps grab a dictionary, look up a word that's going to be beyond their ordinary reading level. And that's how readers learn. That's how readers will end up enjoying their work, because they were challenged, and you want to challenge your reader to be able to interpret. And that's the beautiful thing about literature, is that literature can be interpreted in so many different ways, and that's why there are books that have stood the test of time. But getting back to the idea of if you're editing and revising your work and you're on the lookout for how can you add more scenes where you can show rather than tell, the big one is going to be anytime that you're using the to be verb. And if you're writing in past tense, this is going to be was, I was sad. Instead of saying I was sad, instead depict the character in a way that's going to show that same emotion, that's going to, instead of you saying he was happy or I was happy, write the character doing something that is obviously going to be interpreted as happy. I smiled, he jumped for joy, he shouted Yahoo and ran down the street that he's going on an adventure.
Mr. Bilbo, where are you off to? I can't stop, I'm already late. Late for what? I'm going on an adventure.
Exactly, Mr. Baggins. But again, it's so important to understand that this is not a hard and fast rule. You don't have to always be showing. You shouldn't always be showing. There are times when it's perfectly acceptable to tell rather than show, and you do need to have a balance. If you're finding that you're over-relying on the word felt, if you're over-relying on the to be verb, if you're over-relying on simply stating he is blank, he was sad as he moped through the streets of London with the rain pouring down upon him. In that case, you're doing a little bit of both, but you also need to be very direct. You should also want to be very direct in your language. And so if we take that same example of he was sad as he walked through the streets of London with the rain rolling down his shoulders. What if we instead we eliminate the to be verb and we just say he walked? We use a powerful verb instead of the to be verb. The to be verb tends to be very weak in its representation in writing. Again, he was sad. He cried, right? So, or he was angry. Instead of, let's eliminate the to be verb and say he furiously did something. He shouted, using stronger verbs than the to be verb, because often the to be verb is a pretty weak verb. It's something that especially in first drafts, it's one of those things that when you're writing a story, it's perfectly normal to use a to be verb. It's not grammatically incorrect in any way. It's not necessarily a bad thing to use the to be verb when you're writing, but if you want to be adding more imagery and doing more showing rather than telling, this is going to be one of the big things that while you're going through and editing, make sure that you're looking out for the to be verb. But I also think it's also so important to be aware of how direct you are being with your language. You don't need all this preamble, right? You don't need all this preamble garnering into your sentences. You can chop that off, and then you can have very direct language. And when you're using direct language, it's going to be more powerful. You're going to naturally want to use stronger verbs when you're writing instead of using the to be verb. The to be verb is perfectly fine. I am, he is, you are. I would never write a story in second person unless you're doing a choose your own adventure story. It's very gimmicky. Right, Goosebumps? Yep, they know. So that's a little bit about touching on the idea of when you're and this is something that you don't necessarily want to be stopping and pausing your writing when you go, oh, I'm using the to be verb here. This is something that you'd be doing when you're editing, when you're revising your work, and if you want to be adding, especially if maybe you have a very dramatic scene and you want to, in a particular scene, you want to show much more than tell. You want to show how much two people love each other. Instead of saying, I was in love, you might say something like, I fell to my knees, I dropped to the floor before her, crying, and just using stronger verbs than I was in love, or I was. So using stronger language, using more direct language is going to make your writing stronger. It's going to make your writing you're naturally going to be showing rather than telling. And I think that's what the key of that advice is. And again, there is no magical one single writing advice that works for every situation 100% all the time. And with that, keep it spooky.